All right, good morning and hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this webinar entitled How Surveys and Assessments Can Augment the Accuracy of People Analytics. And your host today is Tom McKeown. Tom's the CEO and co-founder here at TrenData. He's a senior executive with over 25 years of experience in bringing innovative software to market. Tom's passionate about providing solutions that both visualize and guide organizations to their best possible future. And with no further ado, please allow me to introduce Tom McKeown.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And thank you everybody in the audience who took a little time out of their Wednesday to spend it with us here at TrenData. And we'll do our best to make sure that it's a worthwhile experience for all of you. So as Jonathan said, our topic today is how surveys and assessments can augment the accuracy of people analytics. What we're going to basically cover today is, I'll give you just a brief background to our website just as to who we are. But it's we're trying not to make these sales pitches, but really to give you some good topical knowledge data so that you can improve your practices at your companies independent of purchasing a solution. So we'll talk a little bit about who TrenData is, and then we'll move into the meat of the webinar. Principally, we'll start off with the tying of analytics and data, which is not a big leap. You need data to have analytics, but specifically different types of data going even above and beyond, which you might normally use to do some HR type insights. So we're going to go right in and talk about benchmarking, which is kind of synonymous with surveys in a lot of ways, industry averages, and also polling your people. And also assessments, which are tests or something, and I'll go into that a little bit more, of employees as to kind of getting an assessment of their skills, personality traits, and stuff. And we'll talk more about that. And then we'll go into a little bit about, as we're incorporating all sorts of internal, external data, as to what's the best way to prioritize as you're rolling out a system, which types of data to focus. We'll look at, once you get to that point where you've done all that, brought in your data, what's some of the best ways to visualize that information so it's easy to use and easy to consume. And then we'll give a brief demonstration of the TrenData system, more so in a way of illuminating you to all of the stuff above and how it can be used, again, in your own HR practices. As John said, this is me. I'm Tom McKeown. I'm the CEO and co-founder at TrenData. I've been in the software business of HR for about 20 years, so I know a lot of your pains, and hopefully a little to alleviate that as you move forward, and again, building your practices. So a little bit about TrenData. We are headquartered here in the DF, Dallas-Fort Worth area, a city called Richardson, which is just a little north of Dallas if you've ever been here. Site of a big telecom corridor back in the early 2000s. Our company, we launched about 2 years ago. We built the solution a little bit before that, before we incorporated it, but we launched the company in May of 2017 and released our first product in October. We sell largely to corporate clients, but not exclusively. Basically, we sell to anybody who has a workforce that they're trying to gain the health of, and try processes or whatever to get a more optimized workforce. So our solution is we term it AI-driven people analytics, and I'll talk a little bit about the AI part as well in closing. It is a cloud SaaS offering, so it's really just requires a browser to be able to access. But these are just some of our clients. If you ever think of doing something with TrenData, we have a pretty good shot at giving you someone pretty close to your industry who can tell you what it's like to work with us. More importantly, though, I wanted to talk about some of our partners. These are some of our high-level partners. HRIS provide management, Impact Workforce Technology is in the vendor recruitment side. Predictive HR is a big professional services organization, but I'm going to highlight today Engage Talent. They do some really great AI recruiting metrics, but also they can be used very substantially in showing good methodologies to retain people at your company. So I'm going to show how we actually integrate with Engage to get a lot of good external data on that can help you with retention and recruiting. So analytics and data. So essentially predictive analytics or people analytics is the practice of extracting information from existing data sets. Those data sets can be internal or external. As your payroll, maybe your talent management or recruiting systems, and external data sets, often given the title big data because they can be massive accumulations of external data, but it includes surveys conducted by outside companies, benchmark data, industry data. Assessments probably lie somewhere in the middle because it can be built into an internal system, but it could also be something you could hire an external service to do, or provide some kind of benchmarks as to what typical scores are. But basically, an analytics engine brings in all of these different data pieces to be able to build metrics and trend them so you can get an idea based on past performance, what's going to happen in the future, and possibly put in place some strategies or methods to actually improve what the future is going to look like. And of course, with data, the more you have, of course, you could start with something very basic and get some good analytics, just possibly based on the age, tenure, and salary of your employees. But really, as I say, the more the better when it comes to data, both in breadth and depth. Usually to build good analytics systems, companies like to have multiple years of past data, 5+. A lot of our large clients have at least that much. And then being able to bring in as many factors as you can find that will actually give you more levers to pull or indices to investigate as to why things might be happening. And this doesn't all, again, have to be done right away. You could start off with something basic to get a little idea of why things are moving the way they are. And then as you roll in and bring in more data, you can continually grow that. For this webinar, we're going to concentrate largely on some of these external sources, such as being able to bring salary averages in, industry benchmarks for turnover, surveys, assessment tests, as I talked about in the title, and how these can actually augment that internal data that you have to give you not only the picture of what's going on, to use a term, in your bubble, but also what's going on around you that could affect and possibly pop your bubble. So this is mainly focusing on these external sources, which can go even larger than just provided benchmarks by external vendors. It could be things that you glean that are larger than you might think of, weather, supply chain, things that happen if you're a global company that might affect things like commute, people being able to get to work, interruptions, revolutions in third-party countries. A lot of things could affect your business when you look deeply into people getting to work and being able to be productive. So let's start with benchmark data. So really what benchmark data is designed to do is to give you an idea how you're performing relative. And I use that and leave that blank because you have your idea of what your best performance is, or what you're performing at, and what you think your best performance can be. But that can be very relative. If you're looking to form it just within your own company, you can assign benchmark data versus the best employees in your company compared to the medium and less better employees. And you can also design your compensation and stuff around that. But to get outside of it, you want to look at, first of all, what your competitors are doing. Particularly if you're in a sharply competitive industry and you're constantly competing for talent, you want to know what they're offering, what their company culture is like, and is that something that's going to entice your employees to move over there? You can also look at different industries as well, because again, that might be something where it might be a different industry, but you might have a more generic position that it doesn't really matter if it's a particular competitor of yours that someone might move to, just might be a generic skill set, maybe finance, that they can move to another company. But the idea is to use this data to identify the gaps in your organization so that you can turn it into a competitive advantage. So less so be worrying about people stealing from you and have them worrying about your people coming, their people coming to your company because you have the better offering. We'll talk a little bit about this. There's multiple types of benchmarkings that can be established. Really along kind of two main strains. You can have, as I said, internal benchmarks. So for example, you might have inside your company a very, I think I saw a lot of the attendees today are in the compensation areas. And I used to work for a compensation company, and we did a lot of implementations. And most companies who bought a compensation solution had first internal salary bands for their employees, which might be designed by position, performance, and they might have middle, mid, and max averages as to what compensations are determined possibly on tenure, performance, and such. And it could be that all that you have, but what a lot of companies are doing, particularly with salary and compensation, is they want to bring in external data. And that data, as I said in the previous slide, can be different depending on what positions you're trying to guard against. For example, if you are a technology company with a lot of software developers tend to want to stay with software companies. So you might do your external comparisons more against competitors. Google might be guarding against Microsoft or Facebook. Whereas again, as I marked out the point that if you are trying to hold on to finance people who can be pretty, maybe a little bit less dependent on the industry, because finance skills can be taken to different types of companies. You might be a little bit more worried about just companies in the area who need finance talent, and you might be doing your comparisons for a CFO or a director of finance just based the companies down the block or in your city, because they'll probably be the ones most likely to try and go after that talent. In addition to salary, often you're looking at turnover, both good turnover and bad turnover, voluntary and involuntary. And you might, for internal purposes, look at comparing different groups, departments, divisions. So you might see as turnover in finance the same as turnover in operations, or you might compare both of them against total turnover at the company and gauge whether, if they're above or below, and if that's something that needs to be remedied. Again, you go to the outside and you might want to look at turnover statistics versus other companies in your industry. If you're in the insurance industry and your turnover is 14% a year, but the average in the industry is 11, that's probably something that's worth investigating, as there might be just a little bit lesser incentive for people to be staying at your company, and dig into that. The thing about benchmarks is they generally need to be as granular and able to filter, as much so as just the normal filters in your company. So you might have a top line number, which you might say that turnover in your company is at the top line X%, and you want to compare that with first national turnover and turnover in the finance industry. And there's some statistics there I got from comp data. And often stats like this, companies like to compare first at the top level, then with industry, and maybe drill down after that. But in areas, I like to separate different filters and metrics by cause and effect. So turnover, recruiting, performance are things that are an effect of certain metrics, whereas things like salary, letting people work remotely, or in providing development, are often things that the company controls and puts in place to actually prevent things like turnover or low recruiting or low performance. But in any case, when you're looking at benchmarking, it's important that it can filter. So you can look at turnover within your company, turnover for developers in your company, turnover for developers in your geography within the company. And again, there's some more stats from US News looking at, you might have the national average for software developers is 102,000. Is that the figure you're going to use if you're a Silicon Valley company? Probably not, because the national average salary for software developers in California is about 25% higher than that. So again, being able to be granular, move down the hierarchy, and also be able to go even deeper as to location and such is important when building benchmarks and using survey information. Flipping a little bit, looking at assessments, I always like this graph of the world of knowledge. You know what you know, and you know what you don't know. But the biggest part is what you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know it. Assessments probably fall somewhere between the yellow and the purple part. But really what you're trying to get with assessments is trying to find out things that you don't have any data or necessarily any real history, at least within your grasp, to know what possible candidates and employees are doing. So these are tools used to evaluate both employees and job candidates with some kind of consistency. They could be just hard skill tests to see, how capable is someone in a particular task, or softer type tests like personnel batteries, which might show a person responds well to pressure, or they are able to do things like problem solving or communicate. Finding more as these things evolve, the latter is becoming a bigger industry, is being able to test people and then apply that towards how you would work with them in a company. But either way, it's useful both for employees and job candidates. Employees, it's often useful if you don't have a lot of history. So I showed that slide a little earlier that if you have 5-10 years worth of data, you have some idea of what your employers. But if you just put in an HRIS system for the first time 18 months ago, that might not be enough history to start formulating decisions. So you might rely on assessment tests for your employees, even though they're already hired. Whereas job candidates, you're looking into a pretty much of a sense of a much darker hole of information to try and fill in to decide whether you want to bring these people on board. And when you look at what goes on pre and post hire, the ability to know more about your employees, whether it's through assessments or surveys of engagement or other things, there's a lot of places where you'll need this information to both build a better workforce and to maintain those employees and turn them into leaders and performers. Just in the hiring phase, Career Builder, for example, has a stat that 33% of people leave their company within 6 months of being hired. And as we all know, unless you're there over a year, you're an expense. Employers just by people who don't stay with the company after you've invested all that money in training, recruiting, and onboarding, such. Employing, when you look at evaluating skill sets, so this might be another area where you have someone in the company who has a particular skill set and you don't know about it. And a lot of employees just leave companies because they're not provided opportunities to develop skill set. I always think of examples of you're expanding overseas or something. You might have 10 or 15 people that speak Spanish or some foreign language, but you don't know about it because you don't have their full history anywhere. And so you go over trying to hire people to do things, and that shows your employees that you're not investing in them. They might just leave for that. So the more information you have on your employees, so that you can groom, develop, and bad word, but exploit the talents that they have for the betterment of the company, and that'll also serve them well because it'll provide career opportunities and such. As we move into the promotion part, is it better to hire from the outside or promote people from within? Survey by the Wall Street Journal said 61% of people that are hired externally are more likely to be fired. So it generally shows that the more you can groom and bring people up, the probably better opportunity you're going to have hang on, have them be a real competitive, positive asset for the company. So moving on to just prioritization data. I talked about external data, internal data, different types of external data. when you're prioritizing this as you're moving out into the implementing systems, there's probably a better way, the best way to what you use first. So the best process is to start with your internal data to make sure that that data is accurate. You're bringing in as much of it as you can. You have as much history. I'm sure many of you have put in HRIS systems or some type of ERP system, and the first thing you got to do is make sure your data is clean and accurate. We have a whole webinar based on data scrubbing and cleaning and website if you want to take a look at that. But the first thing you need to do is put in your internal data and make sure that's accurate and can be of use. The assessments generally fill in those blanks that you don't have, whether, as I just talked about, whether it's providing history on employees that you might not have, or even, like I say, filling in the blanks of what employees can do that you just may not be aware of, and being able to have more information to, plug holes or, develop people to be more than they're doing currently for the company. From a recruiting standpoint, it's absolutely necessary to be able to find out more about people other than what you're gleaning off their resumes and what they might tell their references to tell you. That's why this is such a big industry of being able to get information on new hires before you bring them on board. But you take your internal data, you augment it with assessment data, get a fuller picture of the people you have, and then bringing in the benchmark data or the survey data. You've got good people on board. You want to make sure that you're paying them well to keep them. You want to know, are you in a competitive market where you have to even go above and beyond that? What are standard turnover trends, performance indices, and how can you beat that and be the better employer? This is kind of how you roll out when you're doing really any kind of a system, but particularly with an analytics system. You start with the core data, augment it with anything else that can enhance your core data, and then go outside and see, okay, I know my people well, I know them versus my people, but what's going on in the outside world. And then the best way to make use of this data is to visualize it. So you don't want to be reading this off of a spreadsheet. You want to have clear, concise data that speaks to you and tells you, here's where the solution is, here's where the problem is. These things might be tied together. If I'm going to continue with this process, what are things I can change to make it more effective in the future? And I'll go into this a little bit more in the demonstration. But just to get back to best practices, the best way to roll out any system, but particularly an analytics system, is to start with having good internal data. Then to be able to fill that data with anything that can help bridge the gaps of what you don't know. And good use of that is assessments. And then being able to complete the picture with internal and external benchmarks so that you know that your people are content, you're aptly rewarding them, and they're less in danger of moving somewhere else, particularly your good people, so you're not going to look at it. And being able to easily see this once you have all of this data in the system. And what's nice is technology provides a lot of this capability for you in a very easy and I say robust but easy to use capability, in that systems like TrenData can bring data in from all of these different sources with our intelligent data gathering. I'll show you a few things on natural language processing, which allows you to easily navigate the system, and we'll show a little bit of our predictive modelings and how that incorporates both internal and external data on an artificial intelligence platform, so that you can not only use the data as is today, but the more you use it, the smarter the system gets, and you get more intelligent insights. The more you put into it, the more you use it. So with that, I am going to leave the presentation for a second and move over into the demonstration. So hopefully everybody can see my system, my desktop now, with starting with data sources. So since that was the big topic of the meeting, of the presentation, is where are you getting your data from? So generally, most clients, at least with our systems, get about 70% of their data from their HRIS system. So, we do a lot with the ones that are listed on the board. ADP, PeopleSoft, SAP, Workday. Some of these are others that we have partnerships with, we do a lot with. And then also able to bring in those external data sources that we're talking about. So if you want to bring in survey information from something like salary.com, you can do that very easily by just establishing a link with them, and it brings it on through the system. You can also bring in data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. If you have any surveys on why people leave the company, or possibly how engaged they are, you can bring that data in. And sometimes you're actually not in a situation where the data you have is automated and coming from a source. You might have an assessment system that just gives you a CSV file or something, but we're very able to address that as well. So for example, our TUF file, our TrenData Universal File Format, can be figured to bring in data from pretty much any type of source or configuration. So for example, if I wanted to go out and upload an output from my assessments, I can just pretty much go out there, find the particular file that has that assessment data in it, and then just upload that into the system with the latest, greatest data, so that my system is fully populated with internal data as well as benchmark, survey, and assessment data. And now I've got all that, I can pretty much go out and start using the system. So as I move from the data sources to the dashboard, you can see I've got here a partially filled out main dashboard. And I've also got several sub dashboards which can contain, maybe specific, more filtered information on recruiting, financial, talent, ongoing, my various surveys. And I'll go a little into this Engage integration here in a minute. But so I've got data in my system here, so I can start looking around and trying to find out why certain things are happening. So let's go over to turnover first. And we can see here we have this is a banking institution where I have a couple of different departments. And I can see right now that my turnover is highest in two of my divisions, commercial banking and consumer banking. One thing I might want to investigate is this a management problem? So in my assessment tests, I have a couple of things that I test. One is communication capabilities. So let's see if I could see anything if I say show manager by department with communication weakness. And if I do that search, it's going to show me something very similar. My top two areas where I have the managers who rated the most weak on communication are in those two divisions, consumer banking and commercial banking. So if I want to have that as something I want to keep track of, I can go ahead and just add that to my dashboard, choose what type of graph I'd like to be in it. I think I'll keep it with a bar graph, and call that just communication and I can just add that to my dashboard. And that's kind of how easy it is to add a new metric or analytic to my dashboard. I also might want to look down here and check out my sources of hire. So I'll look at recruiting as opposed to retention, and see that I'm getting about 37% of my new hires are coming from job boards. Now I wonder why that might be. At a bank, it's a lot of numbers to deal with. Maybe problem solving is another thing that was on my assessment test, and I might want to check out where I'm getting the people with the best problem solving capabilities. So what I can do is, again, check another quick query in my system and show employees by hire source with problem solving strength. And if I do a search on that, it's again going to show me which hire source is giving me people with the best ability to solve problems. And that again shows that job boards, consistent with the metric I have on there, is the reason that possibly why people are, my managers are hiring mostly candidates that come from job boards. And so again, I might want to put that on my dashboard and just show, call it something like problem solving strength. And set that again right next to that source of hire. And now I've got, just by using the TrenData natural language communication, I was able to just ask a few questions and get insight onto trends that I have in the company as to why things are going a certain direction. Now let's kind of pivot from there and look into maybe turnover a little more deeply. So I've got this 3-month trend of turnover by department. But if I go into that and look at it a little more deeply, you can see I can look at it in a number of different ways. I can, right now I've got it in a custom 3-month time frame, but I might want to look at it perhaps over a full year. And I might want to, at least for this view, possibly just look at it maybe in some more limited fashion by separation type. And it'll tell me what percentage of my turnover is actually voluntary versus involuntary. Now again, this doesn't look good because the trend looks like it's on its way up. But I might want to see, can I compare that with what's going on in the industry? So we're able to bring in some of that data. We had the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which will show, although down in April, I was at about 0.5%. I've now risen to 5% on monthly turnover. And I've got some data up here which shows me that the national turnover rate in 2008, according to comp data, was 25%, which equates to about a 2.1% monthly turnover. So for a finance institution, I'm at more than double the industry average, which isn't, that there versus national industry, that is, sorry about that. And if I go down and look at finance industry, it's actually even a little lower. Finance is about 18% annually last year and about 1.6% monthly. So I'm trading up near about 5%, which is not something that's going to be very healthy or sustainable. And it looks like I'm probably losing a lot to my competitors. So what I can do from this and kind of use this information, I can go into what's the TrenData predictive view and take a look at where things are going to go if I don't change anything. So what it says this is going to do is actually keep going up and actually plateau at a very unhealthy rate of 6% with very little signs in the near future that's going to be going down. As a matter of fact, it's continuing to go up just at a slower rate. So what can I do to kind of alleviate this? Well, one thing I can do is use TrenData's modeling capabilities and incorporate some of the things I've learned from the insights using the natural language. So if I go to the summary view, I can see that I have an ability to model based on some factors that are already in the system. So what you have here is you can see these live fields that I can change. One is this is the average salary I'm paying my people for the whole company, about $143,000. I could give people more money, and you can see down here the turnover rate is about 5.84% for April. If I were to increase that by $5,000 per person, what you find is the turnover rate went down about 0.2%, which is not a lot for the money. I've got 1,000 employees in the company, 5,000 per employee. That's about $5 million I just spent, and really got no return for it. We'll investigate why that is in a second. But right now, I'm not going to use that. We can see that I do let a lot of people work from home. Almost 35% of my employees work from home. Being a bank, there might be a limit as to how many people I can let do that because it is a customer-facing profession to a large extent. But in this scenario, what would happen if I did let another 10% work from home? I can see that does have an effect, that people do in fact like working from home. But if I filter that a little bit and look at it by performance, what I find is It's more the non-high performers who really like to take advantage of that. The high performers, it does bring that down a little, but they're still leaving at a higher rate. What else can I do to look at that? Well, if I go down to my third lever, I can see here that less than 7% of my high performers are in any kind of professional development to help out their careers. So what I might want to do there is up that, maybe instead of giving money to just straight out raises, and maybe take some of that and invest it in professional development, get maybe double that number, get 15% of people into professional. Aha. So what that's showing is, based on our history and our benchmark data and everything, that the high performers, what they're looking at mostly is they want to get some training to improve their skill sets. So based on this model and everything that we put in, it's telling you that you're better off spending the money in training better than possible giving it in compensation. But again, why would that be? So what I can also do is do another natural language query and say, oh, why didn't giving bigger raises work? Now what the system is going to do is relocate me to a metric in the system that says how much I'm paying different levels of people in the organization versus industry averages. The industry average being in red here, and you can see that in pretty much every category, particularly in upper management, we're paying above industry averages as opposed to the various job levels. And I can look at this by performance as well if I wanted to, and see that it even in fact shows the same thing. So where we're looking at this is professional development based on all of our assessment and all our capabilities is the best use of being able to reduce high performer attrition. Now, before I go off, I did talk a little bit about another offer, a partner offering that we have from a company called Engage Talent, which gives us a little more ability to reach out and get industry data based on not necessarily package data, but really a more searching capability. So as you can see, we have an integration here, and if I click on that, it's actually going to bring me into Engage Data. And first thing it is going to show is, I'll go to this employee one first. So what I can do is, there's a company in the industry here that actually I actually like and would like our company to be a little more like. Is perhaps I'm a bank and looking at Plains Capital, who's also here in the Dallas area, who does very well. And I would like to learn a little bit more about them, since they are stealing a little of our talent. So I go into the Engage site, type in their name, and it'll bring up some information on them. They're located here in Dallas, 4,000 employees, a little bit more than I have. But if I click on the Plains Capital, it's going to show me a lot of information about Plains. So for example, it shows they do actually, if you have a talent retention index, this is something that Engage offers, 4 quadrants, similar to like what Gartner and some of those organizations offer. But in this one, it's actually reverse. You want to be in the lower left. That means you have lower than industry turnover and lower than companies in your industry. So what this is showing is people aren't staying with Plains Capital as much as other companies, so they might be a right target to go and pursue some of their people. I also have a little bit of information over the left that tells me where they're getting their people from and where they're leaving Plains Capital to go to. So I can actually look and see, well, if they're recruiting all their people from these organizations, perhaps I might go to them and try and persuade them to come to my organization before they leave and go to somewhere else. So I might be able to get them at the root before they even get there. So a lot of good information. And from a retention standpoint, if these types of these companies are stealing finance people in the area, I might want to make a note of where there are big places in my company where perhaps Wells Fargo has a big office in Charlotte. I might want to make sure I take care of my high performers in Charlotte a little bit more than maybe in Omaha if Wells Fargo doesn't have an office there. You can also scroll down and see other things such as, where your competitors rank as far as work-life balance externally of company and management, and kind of get an idea of where you can go to get information, and if this is someplace that you might want to pursue additional candidates for your company, and also guard against somewhere. That might be someone who's recruiting your people if you showed up over here. Okay. Another thing that it can help you with is the job market. So for example, if it has this nice, I don't know why the screen is cutting off here, but if I wanted to look, say, for example, for a CFO, what this will do is give me an idea as to what are some of the best markets to hire CFOs. You see it has a map over here, and it shows me there's a lot of CFOs on the market in California, a little less so in Texas, a little more so in New York. If I wanted to narrow it down a little, maybe with people who have asset management capabilities, it tells me even a little bit more on that. And it drilled down a little bit, shows a few less in Texas. But if I wanted to go to Texas and drill down on that, I can go off of the query and look at Texas in particular, and it'll highlight the individual cities. And it shows me Dallas has about 113 candidates, CFOs with asset management capabilities. And if you look up to the top here, there's a predictive bar which tells you whether they're candidates based on the internal intelligence from Engage, whether red means they're not ready to move. And the further up you go, up to green, will show you candidates that are actually looking to make a move. So if I click on the green, it shows me there is 22 estimated candidates in the Dallas area, 7 actually in the Dallas area, who are CFOs with asset capabilities who are looking to make a move. And this is where it gets, if you subscribe to Engage, you will actually get the names of those 7 candidates. So very, very neat application that goes very well with ours as far as being able to increase retention capabilities. And we offer both together. So that being the case, I want to just get back to the presentation and go back to and see if we have any questions. Jonathan, have we gotten any over the line here?
We do, yes, Tom. We have one that's asking, can we pull our exit survey data from SurveyMonkey?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I didn't actually put that in there, but we can actually, yeah, that's good. I should have put that in there, but you can actually just, you wanted to show terminations by main reason for leaving. Yeah, there we go. You can actually bring up a listing of all the people who took the survey and why they said they left the company. So yes, yes, that's a really good use of the system. Anything else?
Yeah, so in a private message, not in the public one here, someone asks how many, I'm sorry, let me get back to it. Yeah, how many out-of-the-box metrics come with TrenData, and would our users have to set them all up ourselves?
There's about 20 out-of-the-box metrics with TrenData, and those are really the popular ones that HR tracks. We did a survey of about 4,000 HR leaders when we initially introduced the product, and asked them to tell us their top 10 metrics that they wanted to track. And from that survey, we gleaned about, I think it's more closer to 18 that were pretty much on everybody's list, some combination of these. So we've got about 18 out of the box metrics, but it's very easy to create new metrics. As you can see what I did based on the assessments. You don't need BI skills, or you don't have to go to the sysadmin or anything. You pretty much can construct them on the fly using the natural language capability.
Excellent. We have one more. It's just regression analysis, question mark?
Yes, so regression analysis is one of 2 methods we use to project trends and use in our predictive model. So for example, you saw the trending of turnover in that predictive scenario, you could see that it wasn't strictly just taking the line and moving it forward, which is mostly what regression analysis is plotting the path between your metric points in a trend and showing where it would go on average going forward. We actually combine that with employee scoring on different things such as retention risk based on how employees are based on different categories of, where are they versus in the payment scale, performance, where they're located. We can actually build retention scores, and we actually combine that with regression analysis to build the best predictive models.
Great, thanks. That's all the questions that came in on my end.
Okay, fantastic. So if you're interested in following up with us, even just to find out what other webinars we have, or if I can answer any questions for anybody, I put my personal email, Twitter, and blog on here, as well as TrenData's information email address. If you want to follow us on Twitter or visit us on our website, we're also on LinkedIn. We post a lot of stuff up there. So please log in, and if there's anything else we can answer for you, or if you're interested in looking at the TrenData product in a little more depth, we're happy to work with you and give you any information you'd like. So that being the case, I thank you all for your time. I hope it was beneficial, and I look forward to seeing more of you on our future webinars. Thank you.